what is Purim really all about? Why am I celebrating on Purim? What am I celebrating on Purim? Okay, that's the question. Now, what are some answers? So, if we go to the core of the holiday, it's to commemorate a miracle that Hashem did for us. What did he do? He saved our lives. Haman wanted to destroy and annihilate every Jewish person, man, woman, and child, and Hashem stopped him. That's, in one line, the miracle of Purim, and what we're celebrating, what we're commemorating. The Talmud says itself, the point of reading this 10-chapter story of the Megillah is to publicize the miracle. But let me ask you something. What exactly is this miracle that we're publicizing? Can I have any takers? What is, Ron, what is the miracle we're publicizing on Purim?
The salvation.
Okay, what about the salvation? What in particular? We read the 10-chapter story. So what in that 10-chapter story are we publicizing? Okay, so just everybody's one answer from the very, very bright Talmidim. How do I know they're bright? Because I'm their teacher. Anyway, the one answer is that we're celebrating the miracle of divine providence. Now, the textbook definition of miracle. Does anyone here agree that divine providence is the definition of miracle? Divine providence is everything that happens. So I'm not sure if that's the best definition for miracle. But what you said is very useful. We're going to come back to it. Any other suggestions about what we're celebrating on Purim? What is the miracle that we're publicizing? So let's recap what happened briefly. Of course, we're not going to do the 10 chapters because we got to do it twice anyway in another couple of weeks. So basically, there are a series of events that occur that look bad for the Jewish people, right? They go to a festive party that's celebrating the fact that God did not redeem us from exile and did not build the temple when he promised. So that's not a good place to go if you're Jewish. Certainly not a place to go and have fun. And the Jews went and enjoyed that party, which was really against their very essence, and that's problematic. How can they do that? As a result, and as a result of other things, so there's a decree of annihilation on all Jews. Together with that, Esther's taken forcibly to become married to a non-Jewish king. Not ideal. It's not the best shidduch, for sure. Next, Haman rises to power with a hatred for Mordechai and his people and gets permission to annihilate all the Jews. Now there's an actual death sentence on all Jews. Mordechai, the tzaddik, and someone who works and is involved in the palace area, saves the king's life. Saves the king's life. What does he get in return? Nothing. Those anti-Semites. Nothing. Anti-Semitism. Then all of a sudden, because things are arranged in a particular way, so when Haman comes for the final kill, to take Haman and hang him on the gallows, boom. There's a v'nafochu. There's a reversal of fortune, and Haman is hung on the very gallows that he built for Mordechai, and then the Jews are saved, sort of, because they're not really saved. But Haman is gone. Our enemy's gone. But there's this decree to kill all Jews. So Esther pleads, please, my king, you love me, save my people. How can I go on without my people? So, take back your evil decree. He says, I can't. Bureaucracy, technicality, I can't take back my decree. I think it's a cop-out. I don't know if what you guys would agree. You're the king. You're an absolute monarch. This one time, save her people. It's the queen for crying out loud. But he can't do it. Technically, I can't take back the decree. So what does he say? Write your own decree. So they write a decree that we could defend ourselves. In my opinion, that's a bit of a weak climactic ending, living happily ever after, because we still have the potential risk that in 11 months from now, every single Jewish enemy, and there's a lot of them out there, usually, like there is today, are coming for our heads. So there's like this death warrant on us for 11 months. That's not a really happy ending. But there is a stickle of salvation. Number one, we see how miraculously events just unfolded where Haman is gone. And now we found favor in the king's eyes. And even the nation of the kings beginning to like the Jews. And we're like on top on some level. So there's a lot to look forward to. But there's this like doomsday ahead, which we don't know. Now we could defend ourselves. Less people hate us. So there's maybe hope, but we're still we're very shaky. Our lives are weighing in the balance. So obviously we do a serious soul searching. And when the time comes to fight this battle against our enemies, was a war. A one-day war. What happens? So you should know. We went out to fight our enemies that day, and we killed our enemies. And a big miracle happened. Probably a once-in-a-lifetime type of miracle happened. not usually spoken about when we address the particular miracle of Purim. When we mention the miracle of Purim, we usually mention what? Ron, one of my favorite Talmidim. How many Talmidim I have? One of my favorite Talmidim. He said that it's the hashgacha, the hidden hand of God that was working behind the scenes in the Purim story. That's what we're celebrating. But what people don't realize is this. On the 13th of Adar, 11 months after that hidden hand of God showed itself, we had to fight a war. Knives, sticks. We went out with our hands and fought a war against our enemies, which I'm assuming were more numerous, stronger, probably better trained in combat. Okay, so we had a few non-Jews that joined us also because they became Jewish. They were on our side. We were empowered on some level, but who wants to go into a ring with even Mike Tyson now? He's not so strong anymore. Who wants to go in the ring and box him? You're going to get knocked out maybe. So even though our enemies were weakened on some level, but it was still a tremendous, fearful thing to have to face them in a hand-to-hand combat. What happened on that day? So the Mefarshim bring, we'll explain the source in a minute, that not one Jewish person died on the 13th of Adar. Not one. Unbelievable. Even on Hanukkah, when we saw tremendous miracles, a few priests, not war, Navy SEALs, a few priests destroyed armies. We beat the Greek army, priests, and a few rebels. The odds were beyond anything fathomable. But there were casualties on both sides. And in war, we learned from Sefer Shmuel that the nature of war is even if you win, and even if you win in a very, very strong way, there's still casualties. Just look right now in Ukraine and Russia, there's casualties on both sides. Even though Russia's this superpower, war has death on both sides, usually, especially the old type of war where there was hand-to-hand combat. Yet on the 13th of Adar, not one Jewish person died. Now that's what I think is a miracle that's unlike any other miracle. We discuss types of miracles. There's hidden miracles and revealed miracles, which essentially really means, in other terminology, miracles above nature and miracles within nature. I think that when you have a hand-to-hand combat fight against your enemies, the way we did on Purim, the 13th of Adar, and not one person dies on our side, that's a hidden miracle that becomes like a revealed miracle. It's a miracle within nature that is beyond nature at the same time. That's how impossible, to me, that miracle is. So if I'll ask you now, what is the great miracle of Purim? So it's not so simple anymore. What would you choose? What's the great miracle of Purim? Is it the hidden hand of God that got rid of Haman? Yet 11 months later, we had to fight a war. So how miraculous was the hashgacha, the divine providence, the hidden hand of God to get rid of Haman? But at the end of the day, that wasn't the end of the story, and God did not save the day completely at that moment. We faced our enemies physically and fought this war. Not one of us died. I think that's an unbelievable miracle. So we have competition here. So what's the miracle of Purim? So the miracle of Purim is, interestingly enough, both. Both are aspects of the miracle of Purim. In fact, if we look in the Talmud, the Gemara says that when we discuss potential days that we celebrate Purim, so really the 14th and the 15th are the main celebrative days, but when we discuss days that we could read the Purim story, the Megillah, we add extra days. There are days before Purim that we can actually read the Megillah. And this 13th of Adar comes up and becomes the center of attention in one part of the discussion. And the question is this: how do we know we can read the Megillah on the 13th? Maybe we can't. And the answer is no. For the 13th, for sure you can read the Megillah. Why? Because Rashi says the main miracle happened on the 13th. The Ikr Nes. The main miracle was on the 13th. Because what's the main part of our miracle? The fact that we were saved. That happened on the 13th. And even more so, we could perhaps understand when he says the main miracle, because it was such a revelation of the hand of God and his protection and love for us, that not one of us even suffered any type of injury or casualty. So that's an unbelievable miracle. So the 13th, when discussing how we can extend the Purim holiday and the reading of the Megillah, is certainly included because it's an unbelievable day of a miracle for us. It's a great day that has no parallel in history. But ultimately, the deeper message of Purim and why we read a 10-chapter story, twice nonetheless, is because the deeper message of Purim is not only the miracle of the war, but that in our daily lives, everywhere we turn, everything we do, Hashem is there with us, protecting us, helping us. Sometimes we see it, sometimes we don't. And when we see it the least, this Purim story teaches us that's when he's there the most, but completely hidden. When can you find the absolutely secret, hidden hand of God that you can't see, not even with a magnifying glass? Only when you look back. That's the deeper message, and the unique aspect of the Purim story is that throughout the story until Haman was hung, we didn't see Hashem. And that's why his name's not written once in the Megillah, because he was nowhere. But as soon as Haman was hung, it's like a light bulb flashed, a bright light. And all these random dots of events, we were able to connect, a line that connected them all, but only in retrospect. Meaning once we saw the unique thing that the same gallows that Haman built was what he was hung on, so now we connected it to the moment before. What we thought was anti-Semitism, that the king and his people and his government didn't want to give the Jew nothing in return for saving his life, was Hashem holding that back so that he could give us much, much more later. And again, what brought him to the palace? The fact that the troubles with Esther brought Mordechai also to the palace to watch her and hear about the plot. So we see that even the fact that Esther was taken against her will was, again, hard to digest, but part of the hidden hand of God that was originally, ultimately setting up the salvation. Even the first words of the Megillah, that this Suda that we went to, what was Achashverosh celebrating? He was celebrating his new palace and his new throne, mainly. Do you guys know about his new throne? He wanted a throne like King Solomon, and he had a special throne built like King Solomon's throne, because he tried to take the throne, but it was just too big and heavy to take, so he had one built specially. Now, do you know where the most expert throne builders were in the times of the Purim story? The best throne makers were in Shushan. So King Achashverosh had his throne built in Shushan. Do you know why Hashem arranged that the best throne makers would be in Shushan, so that Achashverosh would have his throne made in Shushan? Because the biggest tzaddikim were in Shushan. Mordechai and Esther, the saviors of the Jewish people, lived in Shushan. So Hashem said, you think you're in charge, Achashverosh? I'm going to bring you to Shushan. How? The most ridiculous thing you ever heard. You ever heard of a king? The capital city was in Bavel. You ever heard of a king move his palace because he wants a particular throne that's stuck in this small town of Shushan? So he moved his kingdom to Shushan, where Mordechai and Esther were. So Hashem was pulling strings even before we see the first word of the Megillah. That's the essential miracle that we celebrate the way we do, reading the Megillah twice. That's an essential part of the miracle. But let's not forget, without the last miracle, the miracle on the 13th of Adar, where Hashem showed his love and protection in a way that it probably surpasses every other event that ever happened in the history of mankind, that's still the Ikr Nes. That is an Ikr Nes. That is an essential miracle that we have to remember on Purim as well. And I'll say it in these words, and I'll end with this. Here's what I think, the way the story just comes out to me, resonates and blows me away. Haman, really it starts with this question. What's the difference between Hanukkah, the fight of Hanukkah, and the fight of Purim? They're similar, right? We fought against the Greeks and we beat them. So we fought against our enemies on Purim and we beat them. The essential difference is this. On Hanukkah, there were casualties on both sides. Okay? But on Purim, there weren't no casualties on the Jewish side. So what's the deeper message is this. The Greeks did not say, we want to kill all the Jews. The Greeks just wanted us to change our way of life, and they wanted to stop the Beis HaMikdash service. They weren't after Jewish blood. On Purim, Haman said, I want all the Jews dead. Hashem said, you want to kill my people? You want all of them dead? I'm not going to let you have one. Because if Hashem would have given even one of us over to Haman, that would have been some level of victory. To kill one Jew, he would have been happy to kill even one if at the end of the day he could. Hashem said, you want them all? You can't have one. The absolute love and protection from Hashem, I'm not letting one go. You can't have one. They're precious. They're mine. That's the message of Purim. And you know what? This is the message of Mashiach and the final Geula that's coming. We want to attach the redemptions, Purim, to the final redemption, to the redemption of Mitzrayim, and ultimately to the final redemption. And that's, I think, the beautiful connection. Just like not one Jew was hurt on the redemption from Purim, in the Purim miracle, so too when Mashiach comes, we're taught that not one Jew will be left behind. Based on Kabbalah from the Arizal, not one Jewish neshama is going to be left behind from the final Geula, because we're all precious. We're Hashem's.